Well, the two major stories so far in the U.S. is the South Koreans being detained by the United States and reaching an agreement today. The consequences of that, if any, plus the protests ongoing in Israel. I have joining me now Joy John. She is an international affairs analyst from Bellcrest Institute, Washington, D.C. Lovely to have you this evening. Give us a breakdown of the detention of these South Koreans who were working in the Hyundai LG plant.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So the raid was carried out by multiple law enforcement agencies, including ICE, the FBI, and the Georgia State Patrol. And this is the largest raid in the 22-year history of ICE as an agency. U.S. officials allege that the arrested workers either entered the U.S. illegally or were unauthorized to work or had overstayed their visas. They also disclosed that for months they had investigated, the plant had been under investigation. So it's a significant loss of personnel at any plant, and considering the project that we're working on, it's unclear if the project will continue. But what is noteworthy to mention is that the South Korean president was recently in Washington to meet with President Trump at the White House, and we'll see how that goes.
Right, so the issue here is illegal migration of some sort. But how about establishing communication with the government instead of going in the other way like the Trump administration did? One wonders if there are better ways this could have been handled, not just, rushing to. It seemed like, an intelligence reports, when you're about to get some criminals, the way it looked, some people were in chains, some people were handcuffed. It wasn't a nice picture.
Well, yes, it does boil down to immigration, and I believe that there should have been some direct engagement or talk with the people or with the government, especially when the president was just meeting with you discussing trade and tariffs. None of that was discussed, and the South Korea government, or South Korea as a whole, is an ally of the U.S., is a long-standing ally of the U.S. So, yes, it could have been handled differently.
Right, so this has sparked, reactions in South Korea as the U.S. has been the country's business ally for some time now, and these people were trying to help the Trump administration's goal in terms of manufacturing and meeting industry basic needs, to be achieved. So is it wrong that, there are reactions from South Korea with regards how the Trump administration handled this?
Well, I wouldn't want to say it's right or wrong. Every government has the right to carry out their policies the way they deem most appropriate. But in this case, I think that's the irony of it all, because South Korea, like I mentioned earlier, has been one of America's most reliable partners, investing heavily in plants that support U.S. jobs and energy and security. From the South Korean perspective, what they say, or what we're told, is that their workers were helping to deliver on the promises that the U.S. made about boosting the industry. So naturally, the incident stings. It was very loud because, it feels that their partnership is being tested.
Right, now, let's talk about besides the spark of, some of the reactions coming in from South Korea. So over the weekend, reactions came suggesting that South Koreans feel betrayed. Is that the right term to use? Is it a word, too far to be used when it comes to matters like this? Being that, this is an issue of illegality in the first place. They came in illegally and visas were not processed as they should have been. So, but the word betrayal, isn't that too much to be the term being used as we speak?
So I don't think that betrayal the word fits in right here. There are no sentiments. There are no, should be devoid of emotions here. The uproar is not surprising, but we have to understand that every country has its laws guiding immigration. Ghana, Nigeria, Tanzania, Lesotho, Eswatini, every country, name it, has its own laws. South Korea enjoys great diplomatic relations with the United States. And over time, they have poured resources, talent, and trust into building this relationship. So to see their people detained in such a massive outrage, no warning, sends a difficult message back home
Right.
to so most of them were breadwinners in their homes. But regardless, back to what I will say, or what I said earlier, the U.S. South Korea alliance is strong. It's deep, and they have both weathered much bigger storms than this. So even if there's a valid reason for the citizens of South Korea to feel betrayed, I think that partnership between both countries is not in question.
Now, let's take it from the business angle. Now, the issue here is deterring foreign investments, which the White House defended, dismissing, concerns that the raid could deter foreign investment. So let's look at it as a point of, as economists, who's, I don't know, I mean, you're not an economist, but then the fear of, deterring foreign investment has been raised from this issue as well.
So yes, one doesn't have to be an economist to know the basics here, and I think that's where the tension lies, Olajay. On one side, the Trump administration is arguing that by keeping the system fair, Americans remain attractive to, or America as a whole as a nation remains attractive to investors. On the other hand, foreign companies want predictability. If enforcement feels unpredictable, it can give investors reason to pause. Now, during that visit to the White House, the South Korean president pledged $150 billion by Korean companies into the U.S. economy, and 26 billion of that amount was from Hyundai. So, from for the U.S. to hold, both lines, protecting a labor system and reassuring partners, it's going to be a very tough one, but we'll watch to see how that goes.
Now, over to Israel. The Gaza agrees to a deal to free hostages. Now, the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says, well, the fight goes on despite these calls. What's your assessment of Benjamin Netanyahu's push for, it seems like right now they're not listening to whether or not, there are calls for a ceasefire. The aim from a lot of experts is they just want to take over the Gaza city.
Ligier, this whole scenario, the whole deal is a reminder that even in the middle of conflict, dialogue is still possible. They can still talk, they can still negotiate. For several months, families of the hostages have been holding rallies and calling on their leaders to bring, their loved ones back home. So for them, this agreement is at least a sign that something is moving, there's some kind of progress. But at the same time, I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu is under immense pressure from his security establishment, from political rivals and allies abroad. So what we're really seeing now is him trying to balance the two, answering the humanitarian calls while keeping up a military campaign that he believes is necessary.
Now, there are calls for a deal to be reached already, and Hamas says it is willing to have a comprehensive agreement. Isn't it time for the Prime Minister to, reconsider these calls? I mean, even though we know Trump has been silent, some people say he's working in the background. Republicans have said he mustn't necessarily, voice everything he's doing in the background. But then the silence seems to, if you're reluctant or quiet about it, seems like you back Benjamin Netanyahu. But the question here is, Hamas is ready to have a conversation, for a comprehensive peace agreement.
Well, I think that Israel seems a bit suspicious. If you follow the news outlines, if you follow the reports out of Israel, I think the government is suspicious. And Prime Minister Netanyahu is also juggling politics at the home front, where any compromise comes with a risk. It's a package. If you compromise, there's a risk to that. So while the international push is strong, Israel has to weigh the promises on the table and make sure that they are genuine and, most importantly, sustainable.
Also, do you agree that Trump can influence Prime Minister Netanyahu? If so, why do you think Trump is reluctant? Why being quiet?
So yes, he absolutely has an influence. the relationship between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu is well documented. But right now, I think Trump is also being cautious. His priority now is the American political landscape, and stepping in, too forcefully at this time could create the impression that the U.S. is dictating actions for Israel. And I think that in holding back now or in restraining himself from being too visible in this whole issue, I think it's safe to assume that he wants to preserve his leverage for when the matter may, when the issue may escalate or matter most to American people.
And finally, Western leaders, I want to talk about something that, has been in the news of late. Western leaders are looking at sanctioning Israel, plus many United Nations leaders are agreeing to a Palestinian state. What's your assessment of sanctions and a unilateral Palestinian state? We already know that that is something that Benjamin Netanyahu is not going to agree to, something Trump is not going to agree to. How does the Westerners and the EU, influence all of this? Is that even possible?
Sanctions are a difficult path. And I say this because Israel has a strong backing here in the US and other capitals across the world. What is shifting, though, is the conversation around Palestinian statehood. More members of the United Nations are prepared to recognize Palestine as a state. And that momentum is growing by the day. And if it continues, Israel faces the prospect of greater isolation, even without sanctions being fully enforced.
All right, and thank you so much, Joy John, for joining us tonight to talk about the top stories from the United States. Appreciate you. She is an international affairs analyst here on Arise America.